Star Mini Gaming YouTube video, and it is time once again for another Tactica Tuesdays. And in this video I want to talk about a bit more of an abstract concept that comes into play in Age of Sigmar, and it's something that every player should really take a minute to kind of self-evaluate based upon the evidence. And what I'm talking about this week is tempo of play. Now, if you have just played Age of Sigmar or only a few other, true kind of war games like 40K, Classic Warhammer, whatever it might be, you might not be as familiar with the concept of, tempo play. And if you've played games like Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering, or even a lot of sports like basketball or tennis that I grew up playing, then you'll probably be a bit more familiar with the concept. Tempo of play refers to, how quickly your game style is, right? So in games like Hearthstone or Magic, a lot of times you have a control style deck that is designed to run at more of a slower tempo, but control the game board and kind of force the game to go in the direction you want. You tend to operate a little bit slower because you are, you're trying to consider as many of the different options and variables as you can and account for them, in a neat, kind of orderly way to where you are well prepared for just about anything that your opponent can throw at you. And then you have what is sometimes referred to as a tempo deck, which is, or an aggro deck or an aggressive playstyle or whatever, which is very much the opposite of that. You are trying to speed things up. You are trying to go as quickly as you can. You are trying to hit the opponent before they have a chance to counter. If you're familiar with boxing or mixed martial arts, you'll quite often see this. And in games like, basketball, for example, you'll see kind of like the run and gun West Coast style offenses that's football as well, the West Coast, that are designed to hit quick, hit fast, and leave your opponents unable to react in time. And so in Age of Sigmar, one thing to consider is, number one, what is your natural play style? How do you like to play? Are you typically an aggressive player? Do you tend to go on the offensive? Do you tend to basically see the objective or whatever your kind of goal for that mission is, and you immediately attack it and go after it? Or do you tend to be more of a slower tempo, more of a control style player where you might be, a little bit more of a reactionary kind of thing where you wait to see what your opponent does and then you react to it? You attempt to control the situation as best you can from more of a reactionary standpoint. And one thing in Age of Sigmar that I think a lot of people struggle with in this kind of arena is that if your opponent is playing a very summoner heavy game, then they are in essence playing the slowest version of a control kind of gameplay. You are trying to summon in more units, especially if you're Death. The Death faction, in my opinion, is the ultimate control army in Age of Sigmar. You are trying to summon in more units. You're trying to lay down the buffs on your frontline units. You're trying to, especially with Death Army, slowly grind down your opponent. You are trying to control where the conflicts are, what is in those conflicts, and the way that the battle is going. Now, if you are the opponent playing against a summon-heavy army, a true control army, your only real option to defeat that, unless you are able to play kind of a control game yourself and summon, is to up your tempo. You have to hit faster, you have to hit harder, you have to deny your opponent the ability to control the ebb and flow of the game. So in the earlier example, again, of the video that I did a couple weeks back on how to deal with summoning units, you have to, for example, with the Stormcast, take those, lightning fast prosecutors. You have to use things like the Judicators that can move out and hit something from very far away. That is something that in terms of gameplay terms is a very quick thing. You have to take things like the Celestant Prime that can deep strike instantly onto the battlefield, just about anywhere, and then move in and hit stuff, because basically he is speeding up the game so much in the sense that he doesn't have to come onto the battlefield traditionally and then move across the board. His special rule is such a high speed kind of thing that you're basically getting X amount of inches from your deployment for free whenever he comes into play, is one way to look at it. So you are playing a very fast piece in the game. So that's what you have to look at. You have to look at what is your playstyle, number one. Number two, what is your army's playstyle? Now, every army, no matter what they are, will have variance within them. You can be a Stormcast player and play a bit more of a control, slower tempo type of game. But against certain enemies, you will struggle and probably play into their hands, because there will be armies that are built that are better designed to kind of fall more to that extreme. So if you're trying to play a control game as a Stormcast player, but you're going up against a Death Faction army that is built to control, to have that slow tempo, to control the tempo of the game, then you will find yourself outmatched in the sense that you are a little bit more of a generalist army than they are. That Stormcast force that is designed to be more of a control will still be better at tempo than that Death Faction army that is designed for control. It's further of an extreme along that spectrum. So the second thing, like I said, is to figure out what their natural tempo style is. And the third is to figure out what your opponent's army is. And the fourth is, if you are familiar with your opponent, what kind of tempo game do they like to play? Now, I've played a lot of different strategy games throughout the years. I've talked about them many, many times. The Mech Warrior game, HeroClix, the Lord of the Rings game, X-Wing, Star Wars Miniatures game, Dreadball, 40K, Age of Sigmar, and so on and so forth. And within the games, I have played different tempo style armies, but in kind of stepping back and reflecting, I tend to play more of a control-esque game. Now, I do like to have my control armies that'll have units that are flexible or can be kind of flipped to be a very aggro type unit. I play Hearthstone as well. I play primarily a Priest, which is one of the most control-heavy decks in the game. But I like to have a couple of trick cards in my deck that can take a lot of things that would normally be very control-oriented and make them extremely high tempo, to where, it's that kind of flip of the switch and your opponent doesn't expect it, and then boom, you've suddenly gone aggro to such a, high tempo aggro to such a degree that your opponent's aggro deck would be jealous of that ability. The amount that you've put out in that one turn. In Age of Sigmar, you have to come into, from a strategic perspective, you have to take that into account. If you are the Stormcast and you're going up against a Death army that's very heavy on summoners, you have to understand, for me to win this game, statistically speaking, I need to approach this from a very fast pace. I have to up the tempo of the game. I have to make sure things are moving quickly. That doesn't mean being reckless. That means that, and it doesn't mean that your turns have to take 2 minutes instead of 10. It just means that you need to not sit back with your troops and do nothing waiting for your opponent to move and then you react. You need to be the aggressor. You need to go in and hit what they have quick and deal with it. And then once you've dealt with that, then you can slow down the game or whatever, move back to more of your, natural control type playstyle, if that's indeed what you prefer. But that's what you have to do. You have to look at the way the game is going, look at the models that are on the table, and take into account, what does my opponent want to do? Is their army built to be a fast tempo army or a slow tempo army? And really, to win in any game, but especially in Age of Sigmar, you have to control the tempo, or at least work towards it. So that's going to be it for this week. Please hit like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.